Hello and welcome to the Mind Solution podcast. My name's Sarah Maud and I'm delighted to be joined in this episode by Michelle Reid. And Michelle is the People Operations Director at the Institute of Occupational Medicine and the 25th most influential HR professional of 2022, which is an incredible achievement. So welcome, Michelle. Thank you so much for taking the time to unpack this interesting topic about psychological safety. So I'm going to hand the microphone straight over to you, Michelle, for you to introduce yourself.
I'm Michelle Reid. I'm the People and Operations Director at the Institute of Occupational Medicine, IOM for short. So the IOM is a very little known organisation that is quite mighty and has been for the last 50 odd years. So our fundamental purpose is about improving the health in workplaces and in the wider environment. So we partner with we use our scientific expertise to partner with global institutions, governments, other organisations to use our science to find solutions or risk mitigation for workplace hazards or exposure and environmental hazards or exposure. From a consultancy perspective, because we're independent, we don't have any core funding, so we're a charity. But our consultancy subsidiary takes that science and puts it into practice. So we will then provide paid for services to organisations that enables them to improve the health in their workplaces. So that's a very short summary about what we do. So I have the organisational makeup is quite interesting. So I have scientists, so academic scientists who are very passionate about the science that they do and how they look at the different problems that they're trying to solve. I've then got analytical scientists in our laboratory, so they are churning samples, or they're helping our clients to understand whether their workplaces are toxic to an extent, depending on the samples that they're doing. I've then got site working engineers who will go out into clients' sites and monitor, audit, support, train, and advise on any kind of workplace issues. So that will be either occupational hygiene or ventilation. And then I have expert witnesses who will work with independent clients or solicitors to provide expert testimony in court around an exposure risk. So at the very end of it, so someone may have contracted an illness that has debilitated their life, or an organisation is being sued by someone and they have to demonstrate that they did everything possible to minimise that risk. So they're at the far extreme. Then we have authorised engineers who will work with people who are looking at their workplaces and looking for an expert to advise or guide at a kind of building level, if you like. And then we provide training and things as well. So my workforce is disparate in that, yes, we have a couple of offices that we work from, but they're all over the UK. They could be in and out any kind of given day of the week, with the exception of a lot of the back office functions. So HR, marketing, finance, IT, who all have a hybrid model now anyway, but within a service provision. So that's a little bit about the organisation. So psychological safety, if we
just
start.
Pause for a second there, Michelle. I just want to start by saying congratulations. You've been awarded the 2020 most influential HR practitioner. So before we dive into this topic of psychological safety, I would love to hear from you about what it is that won you that award in the first place.
Well, I have to say, I've no idea. So I've kind of been lucky enough to appear on this list of most influential HR practitioners of 2022. So I'm number 25 on a list of 35. It's peer nominated. So, and you don't know who has nominated you or where it's come from. So I've kind of no idea. Although people that I speak to have kind of shared and said, well, the reason you're on that list is because you are curious about people, you are not shy in doing things a little bit differently or doing what needs to be done. So if I give an example, so right now in my organisation, my title is People and Operations Director, right? So essentially an HR practitioner, right? That's what it is. But at the moment, I have taken on and volunteered to take on the line management of our engineering services. I'm not an engineer. I have never worked in a commercial management role, but there is a fundamental challenge within the culture of that team, the workforce makeup of that team that is then holding them back. So the label of my title or the expertise throughout my career or my qualification or my membership on bits of paper doesn't define what I can or can't do. I am happy to recognise an issue and offer up my knowledge and expertise to help. So if that means that I am essentially the team leader or the manager of a team of engineers who work on client sites, then so be it. Because ultimately we need to unlock those people so that we can realise commercial success. And that's exactly what my core purpose and my core value is. So I don't confine myself to a specialism and go, I operate in this specialism and I don't come out of my box. I kind of look at where can I add the most value? Where am I going to get the most value from? And actually, what value will that bring to the organisation? And that's my kind of 3 value tentative model that I have. And I talk a lot about that with the people that I have internally that I'm coaching or I'm working with. That if people can recognise and verbalise what their core purpose is in the organisational context. So our organisational context is that we want to improve workplaces for people across the world and make them healthier so people can live longer, not be a drain on the NHS, all of those kind of things. Then how do I do that? Because I'm not a scientist, I'm not an engineer, I'm not a lab technician. The way I can do that is unlock those technical people and those people who deliver that in a way that they enjoy working, that they understand what value that they bring, they understand how valued they are, and they understand what value they get from the business, which ultimately is a house of people. And I get quite animated, as you can probably that when people talk about organizations, they talk about them in the third person as if they have a personality, as if they make a decision. They don't. An organization is a house, right? The organization is just a name. It doesn't have an identity. It doesn't have a voice. It doesn't have it doesn't make decisions. It is a house of people. And it's those people within that house that then do the stuff. And that might be the services, it might be the decision making, it might be the leading, it doesn't matter. But the house exists because of the people that are in it. So in your organisation, you've got, I guess you've got 2 choices. And I know that I'm going down a rabbit hole, but this is why I think I've been nominated for that list. You can either be fixated on your numbers and thrash your people to deliver, in which case you then have people turning over, you then have people that are off sick, you then have a toxic culture. Or you can recognise that the numbers in your organisation are a measure of how healthy the environment is, right? So if you have an environment, and I'll use psychological safety just as a term, right? If you have an environment where people feel psychologically safe, they understand how valued they are, they understand what value they bring, and they understand what value they are getting, then your numbers speak for yourself, and you're guaranteed to exceed your numbers unless there is an external environmental factor you cannot control, the pandemic, as an example, right? That, for me, is where I operate in and what drives me. So the numbers in our organisation don't strangle me. So the reason why I volunteered to take on the workplace protection team is not because they were failing, not because the numbers were bad, but actually because the issue was people and culture. So if I could apply my expertise into the people and culture, then actually the numbers will automatically improve. And, 4 months down the line, we're actually starting to see that. So we're no longer making significant loss. We're starting to break even. And okay, that doesn't sound wonderful, but actually when you went from making quite a significant loss and made no other changes other than talking to people, and all of a sudden you're starting to at least break even, you start with your people.
Yeah. So what I hear there that's really creating that ripple effect for you, Michelle, is, well, there were 3 things that jumped out at me, that you are so connected to why your organization exists. It's a little bit like the Simon Sinek talk, start with why. So starting with that why. And for all the people that live in your house, that you're helping them through your coaching style to unlock their own potential, and that you're creating a culture where people feel that they belong, they feel, I love the word valued, they feel valued, they recognize the difference that they're making to that why. And yeah, that's really powerful, because as you say, when you get those 2 seemingly quite basic things right, the rest takes care of itself, doesn't it?
The rest is easy, because what you do is you unlock a growth mindset. Because actually, if people understand why the organisation exists and their place within that, it doesn't matter who they are. They could be the floor sweeper, the toilet cleaner, the administrator, the senior scientist, doesn't matter who they are. They understand their place within that, and that's got to come from them. Why do they choose to get up and come and work in our organisation? Because that's a choice that they make, right? And, yes, money comes into it, but they can go and choose to work anywhere and get money, right? They choose to come to us for a fundamental reason, and that fundamental reason should and can be completely aligned with the purpose of the organisation. So connecting people to that is really important, because of that whole value piece that I've talked about. But it then means that they can be really clear on their own purpose within that. So like mine, so unleashing the value of people, to the potential of people to realise commercial success, right? What that then does is it then takes away any of the shackles that I've got on my specialism, my qualification, my title, and I can apply my purpose and my gifts, I like to call them, in a non-conceited way, to any area of the business that may need or want that. And it's the same for the people that are within that. So, in some of the teams that I am now managing, there was an inherent reticence and resistance to change. And it all came from fear. What's this going to do to me? How's this going to change my job? Am I going to be made redundant? All of those stuff that happens all of the time, right? But as soon as you do a little bit of the curiosity piece, and I'm hugely curious about people, so I always ask lots of questions so that I can understand their view of the world, the path that they've led, and where they want to go to, because everybody's different. So it's always good to be curious, right? When you start to ask them a little bit about that and you help them to articulate their own purpose within that, then all of a sudden the stuff they do changes, because they are desperate to do it better, more effectively, more efficiently, so that they can spend more time doing the stuff that enables them to realise that purpose. And we did something very similar with our business support teams, our administrators. And I stopped calling them secretarial, which was the title, and we moved into more of a business support title, because that's what they do. They're in service of the business, and they use their skills and their talents to help other people who, could maybe do the stuff that they do, but they can do it much more effectively and efficiently, so they can use more of their time doing some of the other value add stuff. And they now do 2 things. They churn requests every day for admin support, but they then project support people. So what I mean by that is they will process map, they'll ask questions, they'll be curious, and they'll provide suggestions on how things could be done more effectively and efficiently to free up time. And they've done that by going from a team of 7 down to a team of 4. And it was that was a natural thing, and kind of fault of their own. But they're actually doing more now than they've ever done before. So they churn a higher volume of work than they ever done before. They support more people than they've ever done before, and they're still driving continual change across the organisation.
And what facilitated that?
Me being curious and me unlocking their understanding of what they meant to work in the organisation. So one of the girls, when I first joined, I remember going and speaking to everybody. So I made the decision when I joined the organisation to spend my first month just going and talking to people. Tell me a bit about your job. What do you do? What does it mean? And, just getting a real understanding of, one, the people, and also the services and the business that we were at. And that just, I didn't do that in every job that I've been in. I've learned that over the years, that actually the best time that you'll ever be given is your first month in an organisation. So sponge it, don't do anything, just go and talk to people, because actually your plan or your strategy will write itself, because all the people on the ground, they have all of the answers, right? They will give you all of the answers. All you need to do is to give permission for those, to give permission and facilitate those things to happen. And I say permission lightly, because we don't have a permission-based culture, and I don't operate in a you will do this fashion. I operate in a, well, that sounds like a great idea, what's stopping you? Okay, well, let me help you type of permission, psychological permission. And so one of the girls said to me, just tell me what you need me to do for you, because I just do as I'm told. I'm just an administrator. And I went, hold on. And I was furious. I said to her, excuse me a second, you are not just an administrator. Do you actually have any understanding of the value that you bring? And she was like, I just do as I'm told. Hold on a minute. If you didn't book the travel, and you didn't do that, and you didn't produce this, and you didn't produce that, what would happen? Nothing. And I said, actually, well, that's complete rubbish in the first place, because someone else would then need to do it. That would take that person away from doing that. If you didn't do that for the workplace protection team, they couldn't then go and improve the health of people. And it was just, there was a bit of, so I brought them together as a team and said, I'm really quite concerned about how you guys feel and where you think you fit in. I'm really interested in hearing a bit more. So we did a bit of a facilitated workshop and post-it notes and a bit of candid conversation, and there was a little bit of kind of straight talking from them and from me in that organisation, but in that team. But essentially we went from overnight them going from being the doormats of the organisation to being actually the glue that holds together the teams. And it was exactly that realization of, why does my role exist in the organizational context? Why do I choose to do it? And then into that value model. So once that purpose piece was done, it was then, what value do I bring? How value do I actually feel? And what value do I actually get? And it just stopped being a challenge to get them to change. And actually it was like they just did it all themselves. So that takes too long. How can we do that differently? And rather than them going, well, if I reduce the time on that, where am I? Actually, I might get made redundant. Well, actually, no, because I can then spend more time on that. I can then spend more time on that. Actually, I can fix it. And it was just like, oh my God, look at this happening.
Amazing. I love that. And it reminds me of the story of when JFK went to the space station and he spoke to the cleaner, and he was like, I put men on the moon. And absolutely. I just thought, absolutely love that. And what also struck me is, I don't know about you, but it was reminding me of my HR days, going all the way back into my HR degree, where we learned about Kaizen, that continuous improvement. But as we talked about just before we jumped on this podcast, that requires that growth mindset.
Yeah.
So many people talk about what's wrong, and they're so focused on the problem, instead of, well, what's the solution? What's the easiest thing for us to do? And I love that you're unlocking these people's minds, Michelle.
And it's interesting because it's not an easy thing to do. It's energy. It is exhausting, and you have to tap into a whole host of your own resilience. And, you need to make sure that you're not giving way to your own imposter. I'm my own biggest critic. I mean, when I got the call to say that I'd been nominated onto that list, I actually went back and said, "Are you sure?" And I went back and said, "Oh, thanks very much, but I'm just checking this is for the right person. Are you sure?" You know, because I've met and have learnt from and follow and listen and look at loads of people who I absolutely have learnt from and feel and believe are better than me. And then when I turned up to find out where I was in the list and to, you know, receive my certificate, I was standing on the sidelines looking at all of these people, most of which I knew in name or was connected with and had learnt from, and I was going, how am I here? Because that voice in the back of your head, you know, consistently tells you either you're not good enough or you're only winging it or whatever. So being able to kind of manage that voice, be able to pull on your own resilience and to continue to be curious and not try and fix things for people, but work on the premise that people already know what they need to do or what they want to do or what could be done. So it's then around, well, hold the mirror up and go, why can't you?
Do you know what I found really curious about what you've just said? And it kind of starts to feed into this whole psychological safety, Michelle, is you use the words, I feel and believe that people are better than me. So if we think about what's creating our experience moment to moment to moment, it's 100% internally generated. And yet we, as humans have a habit of looking outside of themselves to try and understand, why do I think and feel the way that they do? And yet, if we think about what you said there about managing that inner critic, what I would invite you and anybody that's listening to this podcast to reflect on is, what if you didn't have to manage the critic? What if you were to recognize that that voice is not a reflection of what's real? It's just a habitual thought pattern. Doesn't make it true. But if we've not created the internal condition to listen to the truth of who we really are, instead of just old thought patterns that are just circling round, then that's going to be what we keep falling back on. And so, as much as you coach everybody, my love, I would love to invite you to just reflect on that.
I think though, part of where I am now is that I am hyper self-aware. So I'm very much aware of that inner critic and that inner voice, and I've worked exceptionally hard over the years to not listen to it and not fall into the trap of allowing that to overwhelm me or drive how I work. And I know exactly where it comes from. It comes from a number of experiences in my younger years. It comes from having a mental breakdown because of those experiences in my younger years. And it comes from the experiences that I have had since then and throughout my years. So, you know, I'm 43. I've got over 20 odd years experience in the world of work. But not everyone has walked the same path as me. So working quite hard on my own self-awareness and understanding where these things have come from. And I'm very privileged to have been able to have coaching experiences myself, one-to-one, or being involved in training or development, and being able to make the decision to learn from those rather than just attend and put them on a shelf. So that comes from my own behaviour and choices that I make. And for me, I can't change those experiences that I have had, but I can embrace the fact that I've had them because they've made me what I am today. And I am not defined by or at the mercy of them, because the choices and the behaviours that I make today enable me to continue to grow and develop in the future. And I say develop in a sense of as an individual rather than as a career or as a family or whatever it is. It's actually about how I continue to grow as an individual. And that's why I'm hugely curious about other people, because my story is my story. And for me to think and believe that people should act and behave in the same way as me is unfair, because they haven't had those experiences, they haven't walked those paths, they've not suffered those traumas or those losses that I've had that's enabled me to be the person that I am today. And I use the word enable purposefully, because if I hadn't had those experiences, I wouldn't be where I am today. And where I am today is I have a wonderfully loving husband, I have a fantastic daughter, I have a great career, but they've come with hard work. And without all of those experiences and that hard work, then I wouldn't be here today. So I've got to be grateful for them, even though some of them are horrifically traumatic. But I'm grateful for them and I use them going forward. But everybody else has walked a different path. They have experienced different traumas or different issues or different opportunities that they've had. So it makes me really curious about people, because it then enables me to connect more with them and understand things. It helps me then understand more of their purpose and where they want to get to or what they want to do in that particular context they're in. And then I can help them to unlock that themselves, rather than projecting me onto them or the things I would do if I was in their shoes. So I'm not in their shoes. And even if I was, I would react and I would behave differently. That doesn't make me right. It doesn't make them right, but it doesn't make either of us wrong either. It just is a different view of the world.
And so when it comes to the whole concept of psychological safety, what I absolutely know to be true as somebody, I've held about 10,000 one-to-one sessions with people, Michelle, and I know that everything that you have walked on your path, everything that everybody's walked on their path, means that when they're in a situation, they're not reacting per se because of past traumas. They're reacting because of the totality of their experience. So they have, as you said, they have a reaction. Now that reaction's got nothing to do actually with what they think is going on. It's those perceptual filters. It's like the reaction lets them know, what goggles am I wearing? Am I wearing the insecure goggles? Am I wearing, oh my God, they're better than me goggles? Are they wearing I'm not enough goggles? Are they wearing stressful goggles? All of that. So I love that our feelings give us in the moment feedback about what goggles am I wearing? What glasses am I wearing? But thinking about that whole concept of psychological safety, I know from having worked with people that have experienced trauma that if they are still maybe caught in a trauma-based response, which it's frightening how many people have experienced trauma and they don't even realize that they're caught in that trauma-based response, that when it comes to creating psychological safety, what I would put to anybody is the person that we have to create psychological safety with first is us. We have to feel safe in our own body. And I'd love to get your thoughts about how does that then play out when you've got an organization that's trying to also create a culture, because the culture might be, and your culture sounds amazing, absolutely amazing. But if you've got
it's on a journey.
If you've got somebody that doesn't feel safe in their body because of the totality of their experiences, what's your thoughts about that in terms of psychological safety?
So I think, so first of all, I think it's very difficult because people have an emotional response, and I'm probably a bit more simplistic. You explain it exceptionally well about the goggles. I explain it a little bit more simplistic, where in my view, when people are experiencing something, whatever it is, the first thing that comes out is the emotional response. And the emotional response, whatever that may be, stops the logical response, enabling them to deal with that, right? And what I've tried to do, and what we've tried to do here at IOM, is that we've tried to make it natural to talk about how you feel. And that for me is the first step of anything, because if people feel that they have a space to talk about how they feel, and it might be with their manager, it might be with their mental health first aider, it might be with their employee assistance line, it might be with their peer, it might be with someone else that they know in the organisation. But if they feel that, if they know they have someone or an area where they can acknowledge how they feel, I am frightened, I am scared, I am upset, I am angry, I am whatever it is, and they're not going to be judged for that, that then recognises the response, which then actually puts the emotional side of the brain to bed. It's not quite as easy as that, clearly, but that's what it does. And then the logical mind actually starts to come in, and actually they can cope with it. They might need a space where someone helps them to understand how they can cope with it, or how they can deal with it, or what they can do, whatever the space is. And that's for me where the coaching culture comes in. So first of all, it's safe enough that people can go, I am having an emotional response. And that's as much about what we do as the senior leaders of the organisation. So I sit on the boards, and I have got no issue, clearly within reason. Like even on Friday, I had, an exceptionally difficult day, or an exceptionally difficult week that accumulated in me being exhausted on Friday before I left. And when I was having a couple of one-to-ones, there was a couple of people that said to me, are you okay? You're a little bit flat. And I was comfortable to say, yeah, I've had a bit of a difficult week and my energy is quite low. But I actually said to them, thank you so much for asking. That's actually made me feel better. Thank you that you care. I didn't give them the detail because I couldn't, because of the situations that were there. But the fact that I was comfortable enough to say, do you know what, you're right, I'm having an emotional reaction to what's been happening. And I'm okay to say that that's okay. I'm okay to say that that's affected me in a way where I'm not my natural self, or I'm not my normal way, but it's okay. And if I need you, I'll ask for you. And one of them actually said, is there anything I could do? And there was a couple of things actually. And I said, well, if you wouldn't mind, it would be great if you could do. So actually having that space and role modeling that then enables people to cope with whatever comes their way. Yeah. And that would be my short summary of psychological safety and what I try to role model in my organisation.
And what I loved about what you said, Michelle, is when you use the term self-aware, and clearly you strike me as a woman that's done a lot of reflection, you've had coaching, you've done the work. I mean, I put my hands up. I think I've probably had over 500 one-to-one coaching sessions on me, because I know that if I'm going to be the best container that I can be for who I'm speaking to or who I'm delivering training to, I need to raise my own level of consciousness. And what I find really interesting with organizations is the senior leadership team, when they're trying to create this culture of psychological safety, if the senior leaders are not getting regular coaching, then how can we create self-awareness? And I'm wondering clearly your organization sounds like, well, they've got you as a coach and it's something that you really value and invest in. But have you seen other organizations that you've worked in that isn't happening and it's been a barrier to psychological safety?
I think, so I'll be absolutely candid. I think there are areas of my business where there are barriers because of exactly that. However, one of the things that I consciously do is I give feedback as a gift. So where I am aware of, or I witness, or I am made aware of situations or behaviours that limit that psychological safety, or that cause an issue, or in some cases as well that are actually quite positive, then I will actively go and give the feedback to those people and encourage others to do the same. And I think regardless of whether that you've got executive coaching or you've got a coaching culture, you can start a revolution by just doing those themselves. And I think for for a people practitioner in an organisation, whether we like it or not, it's got to start with us. And absolutely, it's got to start at the top. I completely 100% agree. But sometimes those people at the top haven't had those experiences. They don't understand the value of that. They don't recognise or are aware as much as they should be. And it doesn't matter why that is. It doesn't matter what's happened in the past. What matters is how you help them to grow that level of awareness themselves. And that means voluntarily coaching them, whether it's conscious to them or not, volunteering the feedback, whether it's comfortable or it's not, but also role modeling those things yourself. It's a lonely space, so I make a massive use of my external network. So there are people that I've worked with in the past, or people within the HR industry that I meet up with regularly, whether it be virtually or in person, people that I am comfortable to go out and ask for help, or I freely give help when they ask for it, because that's my external team and my support network. And I feel less lonely with that. I'm very lucky in IOM. I have an exceptional senior management team. We have our ups and our downs, but we are mutually supportive. So I think for me, it had to start with me, because I could recognise there was a challenge or an issue. It should never be that we stand back and go, we recognise that, but we need someone else to fix it. That in our profession, we just have to be the one that steps up, like it or lump it. It's a hard thing to do, but it's worth every single effort. And I think in organisations where they're not doing it or they're not getting it right, it's because someone in the organisation is not role modelling it. And it just starts with one and it becomes a ripple effect.
Absolutely. Now, one of the things that we talked about was about, psychological safety is this term that's been coined. Sometimes it's almost kind of formless in its energy. And I'd be curious to hear from you, Michelle, for any HR professionals or leaders that are listening into this, about how do you know when you've got a culture of psychological safety? How do you choose to measure that?
I don't. I consciously don't choose to measure it. The reason I consciously don't choose to measure it is because there's enough measures in our organisation that tell me the health of the organisation. So if we are, as a charity, if we have cash in the bank, if we have work in the pipeline, and we have the dashboard for the organisation is healthy, and clearly we need to have the right measures in there. So we look at our weekly pulse score, we look at labour turnover, we look at absence, we look at retention, we look at cash, we look at profit, we look at all of the typical things that you do. If they are in balance and they're healthy, then the reality is your environment that you have as an organisation is enabling your people to perform at your best, because your organisation is a house. It is a house of people, and those people provide an input and a service. They are in service of the organisation and themselves, and that then results in the measures and the outputs at the other side. Yeah. So I have a strong dislike about measuring culture, because actually I think the measures that are there for your organisation will tell you if it's healthy or not. And when I volunteered to take on the engineering team, it was because it was a growing concern in the organisation. They were not hitting their turnover targets. People were working far too many hours and didn't seem to be producing any of the outcomes that we would be expecting. Their pulse score was through the floor. Did they take a genius to look at those measures that were there to tell you there was a people problem? So I don't measure it in any other way than the measures that are already in place for the organisation, because they are there for a reason. They are a measure of how healthy your organisation is in the industry that it's working in.
Yeah, no, and I love that. So it sounds to me you are actually measuring it already. And as you said, if you've got all of those measurements that are in place, and they're giving you the feedback that lets you know. I'm guessing, can I ask, what's your pulse survey? When you said a pulse survey, what's that about?
Yeah, so we have a performance management system that we use where people, it's end user centric, so people will tell us how they felt at work this week. And can I just say that I am not I don't strive for happiness in my organisation because it's impossible. But we ask them to tell us how they felt at work this week, and they've got a choice. They give us a 5-point score, and they've got the choice to add comments. They also have they are encouraged to share the priorities they've been working on and what they're planning on next week. And then there are questions that they get asked every week. So 2 specific ones. What's went well, and how can I help you? What support do you need from me? That's not the specific questions, but that's the kind of how they are. And then there's a third question that's rotated, so that it's different questions each week, essentially. So it's a tap into the voice of the organisation, but it's a way of people showcasing where they're spending their time, how they're actually feeling at work, and to enable them to plan and to reflect for going forward. So that's what the pulse score is. So each week we can see how each individual and each team and the organisation is faring.
So it sounds, what I'm also hearing there is consistency. You were consistently looking at the data, because I do speak to so many organisations around the globe, and I'm often so surprised at how many are not even measuring the sort of what we might call the traditional HR statistics. And so when it comes to what is it that they're trying to achieve, it's like, well, you've not even got the data that lets you know what the problem is in the first place. So I love that. My final question to you, Michelle, would be, for anybody that's listening into this that is recognizing that they have got a culture, maybe they've got a culture, and I see this again a lot, a culture of burnout, a culture of fatigue, a culture of managers not role modeling, there's no coaching in place, any number of things that are not contributing to an engaged, healthy, productive, profitable organization. And they might be listening and thinking, I don't even know where to start. What would your advice be?
Talk to your people. Because as a manager and a leader in the organisation, your role is not to have all the answers. And I think that sometimes we forget that. We think we have to have all the answers. We have to be the big, strong person that is making all of those decisions and telling people what to do. That's a crap. Excuse my French. Actually, it's more about being curious about the people that you're in service of. Because ultimately, and I'm stealing Bob Chapman's words here, ultimately, leadership is a privilege, right? So you are in service of the people around about you. Your role as a leader or a manager in the organisation, regardless of what your specialism is to create an environment where people can perform at their best, where they can bring their gifts to work and perform well, right? So it's that reciprocal relationship. So if there is fatigue and burnout, people are being off sick, you're not able to keep people for any given length of time, and you don't know, you're probably part of the problem. And actually what to do is go and speak to those that are there. Don't be shy and don't be frightened to go and ask people who have moved on. What was the reason for that? What enables you to cut, for those that are still in the organisation, what brings you to work every day? What do you like? What do you don't like? What would you change? That's the 3 questions that I asked people when I joined. 3 simple questions. And that wrote my people plan. That wrote the plan for me, because the people at the coal face or at the front end of your organisations will absolutely have the solution. Your job is to enable to unlock them to put that solution into place. It's not to do it all. It's not to have all of the answers. And if that's how you operate, then you're part of the problem, fundamentally.
No, I love that. I really, really, really love that. Well, thank you so much for your time, Michelle. Hang on to the line for just a moment, but I'm really trusting that this podcast that's made its way into the experience of anybody that's tuning in has got a huge amount of value and food for thought. So thank you for listening, and we look forward to joining you very soon. Bye bye for now.
Thank you.
Let me pause the recording. There we go.
I'm so sorry, but I need